Today's project is a little more complicated. I'm making a self-watering pot. So the idea is that I can fill up the reservoir and leave the plant to its own devices for a few weeks. So I start by making the actual planter, that is, the top. I take my clay and I center. I'm using around 1 3/4 kilos of clay here. I'm using a fine white mid-fire clay. So now I'm going to flatten the clay out to a little larger than the diameter of the planter. So I'm ready to push down into the center and open out. So I'm just going over the base and compressing the inside of the base. And now I'm ready to bring up the walls. Notice that as I bring up the walls, I'm keeping the form tapered inwards towards the top. This really helps keep the form controlled. Great. So now I have the height. I compress the top and I'm going to start to straighten the sides. So I want the walls of both the planter and the reservoir to be quite straight. So now I'm ready to wire through and set aside my planter. And then I'm ready to make the base. So I'm using a little less clay for the base. So I'm flattening the clay to the same size as I flattened the top. And so I'm measuring just to get the diameter right. And now I'm good to open up and bring the walls up. So I'm making the reservoir a decent size to hold enough water for the plant. So I measure again just to check that the top is the right size and straighten a little more. Now I'm really working on the rim as the top planter is going to have to fit onto the rim, so I want the rim very even. and double check the size, and then it's time to wire through. So for the next part, I'm going to throw off the hump. So I'm going to center a piece of clay, and then I'm going to throw the 3 feet. Of course, you could prepare 3 smaller pieces of clay and throw them individually. I just find it's easy to center a larger piece of clay and throw them off the hump. So I've portioned off the section of clay that I'm going to use for the first foot, and now I'm pushing down into the clay with a tool. I'm using a tool so I don't push the clay out too much when I push my finger down into the clay. But I do use my fingers to bring the clay up. I straighten the foot and measure the top. And now I'm ready to cut the foot off the hump and set aside. So I need 3 feet. So I'm just going to power through the next 2, doing the same thing, portioning off the clay and then forming the feet. And now I can set these aside until they're dried to leather hard. Great, so now I take the base and flip it over. I'm going to trim the base on the batt that it was drying on. So now that we're good to go, I'm just going to trim around the foot and across the base. Compress, and now I'm ready to trim the top. So trimming the planter top is pretty similar. First of all, I need to trim a ridge around the base. This is the part of the base that fits into the reservoir, and this is what will prevent the pot from sliding off the reservoir. As I go, I check to make sure that the reservoir actually fits firmly on the pot. That's looking great. And now I'm just going to flatten and compress the base. So now I'm ready to set out the feet. So I'm not trimming the feet, I've just smoothed them over a little. I've also made a hole in the base of the foot so the water will be able to work its way through. So I'm just going to work out where the feet are going to sit. Equal thirds would be good. And then I mark where the feet are going to go. Now I'm ready to cut into the base So I have a hole cutter that's the right size. And now I score and then slip and join. So for slip, you can keep some of the slurry that's left over from throwing. So for each foot, add some slip, give each foot a bit of a jiggle, and then you're going to have to blend a little to make sure that they're really well joined. When I've finished joining on the outside, I'll flip over my pot and just make sure that I blend the inside foot to the inside of the pot carefully. And now I can just make sure that it all fits together. Perfect. So let's take a look at the feet. And from the bottom, great. So now I can bisque, glaze and fire. So I've glazed the exterior in a eucalyptus glaze. The interior, I've used a clear gloss, so it'll be easy to clean. I've fired these together, so I took particular care to make sure there's no glaze around the base or on the rim of the reservoir. And this worked, they separated easily. So now it's time to plant. So I add soil and make sure that the soil works its way down into the feet. And then I'm going to plant these peperomia plants. So I finish planting, I'll fill the reservoir. I'll actually water the plant a little from the top to water it in, and then pop the plant pot onto the reservoir, and it's good to go. If I make this again, I will modify the design and definitely add an easy way to add water to the reservoir. If you want more plant action, check out my profile rib video. Anyway, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.